A light mist hung over the water's surface of the river. Night birds chattered in the darkness, and cicadas accompanied them with their buzzing. Twilight was an excellent time for fishing. Few ventured out at this hour to engage in fishing, and Simon took advantage of that. Moments like these allowed for genuine relaxation and an appreciation of the natural atmosphere. Most importantly, it promised a good catch. Before lowering his boat into the water, Simon surveyed the river's surface. Young fish played near the bottom, timidly swimming towards the shore. With a gentle touch, he disrupted the clear, calm water, causing the fish to scatter in various directions. With the boat now afloat, Simon hopped in and paddled further into the river. A light breeze pushed him forward, sending shivers down his spine. He pulled his jacket tighter as he distanced himself from the shore. Once he found a suitable spot, he cast his line. He didn't have to wait long for the first bite. A few minutes later, the fish grabbed the lure. An old, reliable worm with a special twist always did the trick. The second cast took a bit more patience. The fishing was going exceptionally well. Half a bucket was already filled, with another ready to be used. Simon was caught up in the excitement, losing track of time and everything else. Fishing had consumed his thoughts to the point where he hardly noticed a peculiar fish swimming up to his boat. It was unusually large, with a rounded body and angular edges, and its head bore an uncanny resemblance to a human's. As Simon peered over the edge of the boat to wash his hands, the strange fish swam away. He noticed it, gazing into the water, but it was nowhere in sight. Must have been my imagination, he thought, casting his line once again. But as soon as he cast the line, the same fish suddenly leaped out of the water, clamping onto Simon's hand. He cried out in pain, grabbing the creature by the tail and trying to pull it off. Its teeth dug deep into his flesh, making it impossible to dislodge. In desperation, he beat the fish with his fists until it loosened its grip and fell back into the water. Blood flowed from his hand, streaming into the calm water, which seemed to attract more of these creatures. Simon firmly pressed his hand to the wound, realizing he couldn't stop the bleeding. He had no choice but to use his jacket sleeve to stanch it. Now he needed to get out of there. Simon hadn't paddled more than a few meters before more of these creatures attacked him. This time, 3 fish bit into his flesh, all aiming for his forearms, causing him to drop the oars. His body convulsed, pain intensifying. Simon struggled but couldn't fend off the river creatures, and he ended up beating them against the boat's sides. They eventually let go, taking pieces of his flesh with them. Collapsing into the boat, he cried out, but his cries went unheard. More of the creatures were swimming closer to their prey. As one of these fish landed on the boat, Simon swiftly grabbed an oar, sat up, and used it to crush the creature's head. With difficulty, he stood and began swinging the oar to fend off the relentless horde. It was a fierce battle, and more of these creatures emerged. Dozens turned into 100, and it became impossible to fend off such a multitude. His oar eventually broke. Suddenly, everything fell silent as Simon grasped the second oar. The water creatures ceased their attack. He remained on guard for a minute until the tension in his body subsided. He realized that now was the time to escape. With only one oar, it was challenging, and swooning was not an option with his bleeding arms. He hoped someone would hear his cries for help, but all he heard was silence. Simon had nearly lost hope when the water began to bubble in front of his boat. He turned his attention to it. With each passing moment, the bubbles grew larger, forming a small wave heading toward his boat, increasing in size. This wave was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a wall of these creatures, surging toward him and creating a water current. Simon covered his face with his hands, though he knew it was unlikely to help. The wave of river monsters engulfed him, swallowing his boat. The next day, 2 fishermen discovered Simon's body floating on the surface. His back was torn and bloody, his spine exposed. The fishermen abandoned their rods and ran to get help. Meanwhile, more of those creatures swam closer to the shore. Simon's lifeless body floated downstream, a dark reminder of the horrors that lurked beneath the river's serene surface. The fishermen who had found him were shaken by the gruesome sight, but knew they had to report what they had seen. They raced back to their village, frantically describing the monstrous fish-like creatures that had attacked Simon. Their accounts were met with disbelief and unease by the villagers. People were warned to stay away from the river, especially during twilight, as it seemed these creatures were particularly active during those hours. The village elders convened a meeting to discuss the situation and make a plan to investigate further. A group of brave villagers, armed with nets, fishing spears, and torches, set out to confront these mysterious river monsters. They carefully approached the water's edge and watched in astonishment as the grotesque fish-like creatures surfaced, their inhuman features sending shivers down the spines of the villagers. The monsters were not only aggressive but also highly coordinated, attacking as a group, which made them even more formidable adversaries. The villagers repelled, trying to chase the creatures off their territory. There was an intense battle between humans and these aquatic terrors, and although the villagers managed to capture a few of them, it was clear that the river was infested with many more of these monstrous fish. Back in the village, a marine biologist who had heard of the unusual occurrences arrived to investigate. She identified the creatures as a mutated species of river fish that had adapted to their environment in an unexpected and terrifying way. She speculated that pollution and changes in the river's ecosystem had led to these mutations. The biologist shared her knowledge with the villagers and worked with them to develop strategies to manage the situation. The villagers, with the biologist's guidance, launched a campaign to clean up the river and protect its ecosystem. They hoped that by restoring the river's health, they could prevent further mutations and mitigate the aggression of these fish-like monsters. In the meantime, warning signs were posted around the riverbanks, cautioning people about the danger and advising against fishing in the twilight hours. As the villagers joined forces to reclaim their river, Simon's tragic encounter had served as a warning, reminding them of the consequences of neglecting their natural surroundings. They vowed to protect their environment and preserve the beauty of the river, ensuring that it would once again be a place of tranquility and serenity for generations to come.